especially with the passage of the new legislation, the big beautiful bill. And what does that help on the tax side of things? Do we move money from a taxable account into a tax-free account, like a Roth conversion? That's certainly conversations that need to happen.
Well, we all enjoy and appreciate an extra day off work, a holiday weekend. It's a good time. However, the true celebration of our individual hard work and labor is a secure and confident retirement. So, while we reflect on the celebration of the American worker for the Labor Day holiday, let's also think about what it takes to achieve and accomplish that secure, fulfilling retirement. And to help us along with all of the things that we need to consider and be doing to make that happen, Chris McIntire, president and founder of McIntire Retirement Services. Your resource, ladies and gentlemen, for a common sense approach to planning for your financial investment and retirement future. President and founder of McIntire Retirement Services, a resource for so many proactive savers and investors throughout Northwestern Ohio. So, Chris, welcome back to your game plan for retirement. Always appreciate the time. Do you have any plans, agenda items for the Labor Day weekend holiday?
Well, I live up here in Tourist Central, and I'm a good boss, so we actually give the staff Friday off as well, so it's an extra long weekend. And we'll if the weather's nice, we'll get a few boat rides in and just lay low. My mom had a little bit of health issues here, so we've had some visitors at our house, so probably lay low and take it slow, ideally.
Well, a little downtime is probably needed for everyone. And again, this holiday, it is an occasion to remember and remind us of the dedication, the sacrifice, the accomplishments of the American workforce, right? Generations that have put in efforts into building industries and sustaining communities and advancing the prosperity, really building the middle class is what I think this is all about, from factory lines to towers to classrooms and hospitals, all of those. But the true celebration, Chris, of our individual efforts is feeling more confident, feeling more financial freedom. But that actually takes a lot of work. And we get to the end of a career, we've got more money than we've ever had personally built and accumulated in our retirement accounts. And yet there's still this lingering doubt and worry and uncertainty about the lasting prosperity and financial freedom that we have achieved for ourselves.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think we've played the role of psychologist here a lot this year. After Liberation Day there in the month of April, and a sharp decline in stocks, and everybody has just seemed to be so you know uh, paying attention to every little piece of information that comes out from whatever news program that they're getting their information from. And, I think our political environment doesn't make anything better. The vitriol, I think is the word I'm looking for there. The poison that they spit at each other is awful. And, you can understand why people might have some bad feelings and, some worry and whatnot, as to what the future might look like. And all that being said, in the stock market's at record highs, and most companies are beating their earnings estimates. The tariffs did not bring the end of the world. Short-term spike in some interest rates. And, ideally, I think we're all hoping that the Federal Reserve does make a couple of interest rate cuts between now and the end of the year. And, the size and frequency is, yet to be determined. That will certainly help, especially the small companies, and many people have small companies in their investment portfolio. It will lower their borrowing costs. It will lower the borrowing costs for homeowners looking to, move up to their next neighborhood. Peter, you're young enough. I don't know if you're looking at moving or not, but if you're looking for a mortgage, it's, when the one you got might be 3% and the one you're going to get is 7, that's a heck of a big difference for sure.
Yeah. Well, we want to try to map everything out as much as we can, but there's always that unpredictable nature of the market, and then the unknown amount of time that we've got to make our finite amount of assets last. And I think even like a holiday weekend or a vacation, budgeting our time, having the activities, budgeting our money to make sure that we can afford to make it through to the end and don't overspend. That's difficult even within a long weekend or a week away from work. But when you talk about decades of an unknown amount of time into the future, I think that's where the doubt and worry creeps in. And why, ladies and gentlemen, you need a plan, not just winging it, not just spending discretionary and at whim, but like actually having a true plan so that you know you're enjoying life and living a fulfilled retirement, but also that you are not over enjoying things, that you're keeping it between the guardrails there. That's what a plan is going to help you really hone in on, identify, and make sure that you are living by. So if you would like to get your game plan for retirement put together, making sure that you're maximizing available income, you're minimizing taxes, you're doing the right thing with your investments, you're addressing potential healthcare concerns, and if it's a goal for you, leaving an impactful legacy behind. All of those things are included in the game plan for retirement, your game plan for retirement when you come into McIntire Retirement Services. And if you'd like to get that conversation started, give a call. That is 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532. Chris, you spoke of those inflation numbers. A couple thoughts on that. The CPI recently came out and it was pretty tame, the consumer price index. But the PPI, the producer price index, came out a little hot. Is the discrepancy between those kind of indicating that right now producers are actually kind of eating the impact of the tariffs and they're adjusting on their side without affecting consumer prices? Or is this kind of a yet to be seen type of thing with are those increases in production costs going to trickle down to the end consumers, to you and me?
Yeah, it's a great point, great question there, Peter. And the producer's price index, that's probably got a little short-term tariff hit to it. And will that affect the consumer price index? It certainly could, because I just read where Home Depot is going to be raising some prices here, and part of that's tariff. Obviously, if they deal a lot in lumber, that comes a lot of that comes from Canada. As those of us that live up here near the border, we're dealing with wildfire smoke once again this year. We know Canada does export a lot of lumber to the United States, so there's certainly those two numbers certainly can affect one another. The timing and the speed of it is yet to be determined, and I think in the month of July that there was some inflation around the tariffs. That didn't show up in June, but did in July, and we'll see where we go into probably into August, September, October, because some of the trade deals have already been signed, and that stuff takes, a little bit of time to work its way to the system before we see it in the data. And then, oftentimes the data comes out and then they do a revision on the data as well, so this is what we're forecasting, and then 3 weeks later, this is what really happened. We have to revisit it, restate the facts around, whatever data that they're trying to get out to us. So, it takes time and patience, and, you got to leave emotion at the door here in a lot of things, and, be in it in the long haul, because ducking out into cash is a hard thing to do, because when do you duck back in? On April 8th was kind of the bottom of the market, and on April 9th, it rebounded 9%. So if you were sitting on the sideline, and the market fell 15 to 18%, and you missed a 9% bounce in one day, that's hard to recover from.
I love talking with you, Chris, because you go in depth on certain things, and then kind of every conversation leads to new questions that I have, and you're capable of talking them through and explaining them, and that's something that, as candidly I've done it on this side of the microphone, I've always appreciated about conversations with you. The discussion, the mention that you had of the expectations for interest rates. And I'm going to also compare this with your employment number revisions. Like there is this expectation that interest rates are going to be cut at some point in time. Is this an example where the market might price that in ahead of time, and then when it actually happens, maybe not have the reaction that we expect? Or, I mean, you mentioned that lower interest rates would be good for small businesses and for housing. So hopefully, eventually, the market would strengthen as a result. But if that interest rate cut is not as large or not as soon as we expect, there's two sides to this coin here, right?
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt, Peter. And I'll make a relation to like the bond market. The bond market's having a pretty solid year right now, and I think corporate bonds. There's an ETF called LQD, and it's about corporate bonds. I think it's up 4.5 to 5% on depending on what given day we're looking at. And part of that is investors would be anticipating interest rates to come down. Well, if you hold bonds that are higher paying interest rates than where the new ones are going to be, those bonds become worth more money. So you get a capital gain on the bond, and we've seen some of that this year. So yes, I would think that some of that certainly gets priced into the bond market, especially on the interest rate side. And depending, do they do a quarter point or a half point? There's where we would probably get some significant movement. I think a quarter point's probably pretty well priced in at this point, and I know Scott Bessent, one of President Trump's, chief negotiators and Secretary of the Treasury and whatnot, is really pushing the Fed to do a half point rate cut. And for some reason, just my personal opinion, without all the factual data, I think we'll probably get a quarter point cut, and then maybe another quarter point cut after that, and another one after that. Because does a half point send a red flag? Does it scare off investors that, okay, the economy's worse than what we thought? So, they're also walking that fine line to, maintain stability.
Yeah, but the expectation has sort of been overdue. I mean, Trump has been pushing Powell and the Fed to lower interest rates for quite some time, even though the economy seems to be doing well and inflation has come down relative to where it was. The Fed has been kicking back, not quite at our target yet, right? So all of these factors play in. And these are all things that are outside of our individual control. And that, I think, is the scary part for people, right? We can only control what we can control. And then when we're looking at creating true, lasting financial freedom for ourselves, it is those things that are outside of our control that are so scary. So, Chris, let's talk about some critical elements during our working career that might be overlooked as far as what we need to be doing to create that financial freedom through our lifetime. And I know we all set our alarm. We get up out of bed. Sometimes when we don't want to, we show up to work. We put in our sweat, our skill, our intelligence to earn a paycheck. That's only half of getting ready for retirement. It's an important part of it, right? But like, there's so much that goes beyond just earning the paycheck that is going to make for a better chance of a successful retirement.
Peter, you're exactly right. And, I have a couple of clients that said, I just got lucky in amassing this amount of money. I just put it in there and I let it go. And, I invested, pretty aggressively through most of my retirement. And, it's like, that wasn't luck. You were prepared when the opportunity struck, and you did a plan. You had a process. You maxed out your contributions. That's not luck. The stock market goes up more than it goes down. So the younger you are, the sooner you get started, the better that stuff shows off down the road. So, but as you work your way into retirement, if you haven't done a whole lot of planning, you want to start planning that out ahead of time, and I'm 60 years old. We certainly look at things here a little bit different because we're getting into a different phase of life as we get older. We worry more about health concerns, and, we got aging parents, that, also that we help out financially. So, there's a lot of different ways that life changes as you go through here. Peter's got a younger son who might be a Major League Baseball pitcher, but I'm sure Peter's, his focus is saving. At the phase I'm in, the process I need to follow is how do I pay for his college, assuming he wants to go to college, and teach him to be independent. And then later on in life, Peter may have to care for parents. kind of like we have to do right now and make sure we're doing things to stay healthy. So there is a process. Look, you need a retirement budget as well. If you're not making $250,000 a year, in income and you need to live off of $60,000 a year, look, what's the budget that makes that happen when your income gets slashed? And, I think about those things too, because I do it all day. I can see, the clients that have done well, how much better off they were with all the proper planning. They had their estate plan in place, they get long-term care insurance of some form, they secure their retirement income, they listen to us on tax strategies, Roth conversions, and many of those different things. They just don't luck into that. It is where luck is where preparation met opportunity.
Uh, you do have a more holistic conversation though as well, I feel, Chris, to shed light, to really uncover some of those items that a lot of people have not addressed. A lot of advisors do not cover and address. Like there are a time and a place and a value for access to the market. Hey, here are some mutual funds that you can invest in. Hey, here's a 401k that has your choice of 15 to 20 funds. I'm not understating the importance and the value of that. And many people have done a good job, not only in waking up early and showing up to work and earning that paycheck like we just talked about and getting some money invested. But when you talk about those opportunities for, assessing and being proactive to control taxes, I think that a lot of people are not getting that advice. When you talk about, transitioning to retirement, let's really sit down and look at how and when to coordinate the Social Security benefits along with the withdrawals from your retirement assets. Like, I think that side of the equation is just overlooked. So while it takes more than just earning a paycheck, to get to a point where we can create financial freedom for ourselves, it takes a whole different set of conversations once that paycheck stops to make the most of that time too.
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt, buddy. And some of these areas is where you've got to make some important decisions, and mistakes obviously can be fairly costly here. We're coming up on the time of year where we start doing a lot more Roth conversion, so we're trying to be proactive to certain clients that need to take advantage of this, especially with the passage of the new legislation, the big beautiful bill. And what does that help on the tax side of things? Do we move money from a taxable account into a tax-free account like a Roth conversion? That's certainly conversations that need to happen, that should be happening right now. And if you have a CPA, or even if you do your own taxes through like a program like TurboTax, run a couple of what if scenarios. What if you did a $50,000 conversion? What does that do to your tax situation? It's a very favorable tax environment. We've been saying that for many years here, obviously, but now it just, we have another time window here that we get to operate under, and to take advantage of that. And you might be winning the football game at halftime and turn the TV off, and then you end up losing. So we would certainly want to help people walk through and understand some of these processes, because it can be confusing. There's a lot to this. If you amassed, significant wealth, and that's a broad definition. It could be $1 million or $2.5 million. If that's in an IRA, there's a lot of taxable elements to that you need to really understand. It's not just about investing, it's about what's the proper way to withdraw it. And at the end of the game, you kept as much as you legally could. I don't want to say you beat the IRS, because that's not the point I'm trying to make. None of us can beat them.
Now they know about every dollar that's out there pretty much, right, Chris? They have a plan for it.
Correct. Yep. Yep. We all want
I,
to drive on smooth roads and all that stuff
Well,
too. So
I,
we
I
do
think
have
there
to
was a
pay the
judge,
freight.
though, in DC who, on his way home, there was a toll bridge, or he could go just a little further and cross a bridge that did not have a toll. And so that's the road that he took every day. And he sort of used that as the analogy that putting in strategies that help to avoid the cost of extra taxes is not illegal, right? That is just smart planning to avoid those extra costs. I do want to circle back to your conversation about Roth conversions and the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill. You have talked about the fact that you're an advocate for helping clients to manage their taxes. We have been in a low tax environment. You've been pretty proactive on helping people work through the nuances of Roth conversions, which I think has been a great thing. But those low taxes now with the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill have been extended for a little longer. And it's retroactive to the beginning of this year, but there are some other nuances within that bill that also have affected the tax situation, the rules and requirements and additional deductions. So long story short in a question, has that changed your perception or your discussion on what Roth conversions are all about? The either the importance or some of the nuances.
Yeah, it certainly has, Peter, because it's opened up opportunities. People that are 65 and older get a much bigger deduction. So, right now, if you got a married couple that's 65, their standard deduction is $30,000. So that's $30,000 of income they don't pay any tax on at all. And then if they're over 65, they both get $6,000. So now we're at $42,000 before you start paying tax. And then the first bracket you go into is the 10% tax bracket. So in that ballpark range, if you got $65,000 of income, you're paying 10% tax on $23,000 of income. That's 2,300 bucks. I mean, it's hard to get any better than that. And then we hit the 12% tax bracket. So, we kind of say, look, if you're in that 130, $140,000 income tax range, that's about the top of the 12% tax bracket. And in 1986, if you had $68,000 of income, that tax bracket was 38%. Today it's 12. I mean, the numbers don't lie. It is one hell of a good time to be doing Roth conversions for many folks listening to the show. And, to what degree do they do that and what's the dollar amount? That's where you get into the individual pieces.
But Chris, the extra Social Security deduction, which by the way is actually not on the Social Security itself, it's just an extra deduction if you are of general Social Security age. But that phases out with a certain amount of income. And I know when we're trying to manage taxes in retirement, we've had these conversations. We're also trying to avoid some potential extra costs, like with our healthcare and Medicare premiums, the IRMA surcharges. Now, are we looking at potentially a little lower threshold because we also don't want to jeopardize that extra $6,000 or $12,000 Social Security deduction?
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, Peter. And I'll say this: we have a fair amount of clients that we work with that have some pretty good net worth, and many of them we actually pay to have their income taxes done with a couple of CPAs that we're used to working with around the area, so that we can help them with the Roth conversions and whatnot. So we do have some value adds in there that we do. A nice network of professionals for sure, and to help people solve the problem. Because, like you say, I mean, investing is one thing. We're not brokers. We're investment advisors. Where we look at and where we help people plan for the future. Taxes and investments obviously are very key piece to that, and then also having some saved money is a very big piece. And helping them get their estate planning documents, helping them get some long-term care protection of some sort in play. There is a lot to this piece, because if you have, had some financial success and you're sitting on a million, million and a half, $2 million, well, if you go into the nursing home, you're talking $100,000 a year. Do you want to carve off a little piece of your nest egg to ensure that you don't have to write a $10,000 check every month? Somebody else does. I mean, that's smart math, right? That's why you insure your house, right? So somebody else pays the bill if it catches fire.
So many factors we need to worry about. And again, those things that are outside of our control are, I think, the majority of the worries and the uncertainty. But the longevity that we have, the potential for market volatility, taxes, healthcare expenses, all of these things are not addressed with just access to the market, just having a 401k or having a brokerage account. And I think that's the distinction you talk about, Chris, with investment advisor, true advisor with that fiduciary responsibility versus a broker who gives you access to the market, or versus a 401k, which is a great tool. And a lot of people have done well using those tools and building up investments, but we really do need to complete the plan. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what your game plan for retirement is all about. That is the plan that you can get by calling Chris McIntire and McIntire Retirement Services, addressing income, investments, taxes, healthcare, and legacy. If you would like to get yours put together, see what that difference means in your sense of financial confidence and well-being, the freedom, passion, purpose that you can have financially, pick up the phone, give a call, 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532. That is 419-332-0532. You can also go online to McIntyreRetirementServices.com, McIntyreRetirementServices.com. Coming full circle here, Chris, back to our analogy for Labor Day and vacations. There have been vacations where I have either gotten bored a little early, like when it's raining down at the beach. You've been to the Outer Banks on North Carolina coast, I'm sure, a time or two when it's been raining. You can only play so many games of cards and you start to get a little bored, right? Or on the other side of that, you don't want to have too much fun too early and then still have a few days of vacation left, but be out of money. And so I've experienced both of those a time or two. That is extended to a perspective of decades over retirement. We've got to have some activities, some things that we are going to do to fill our time and have a purpose. But we also need to know how to make sure that we continue to have money to last through those final days and as long as we need them.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Peter. And I've had so many clients come up to me after they've retired and said, I don't know how I found time to work, because they get involved in other activities and whatnot. And some of
That's
that's
great.
volunteering, yeah, not necessarily paid activities by any stretch. And, having that budget in place, and, when things go well in the markets, that's when you can do some extras. When things aren't going so well, you have to have some flexibility to say, well, we're going to come over here and pull off of our safe money. We're going to leave the risk money set to the side. But, because we plan, yep, we can do it.
Well, again, that's what the game plan for retirement is all about, ladies and gentlemen. Finding that balance, making sure that you've got a plan to address the income that you need, the investments that you want to grow, the taxes that you're going to pay. Keep as much of your money as possible. Healthcare costs, expenses, and protections, and leaving that meaningful, impactful legacy, all while having freedom, passion, purpose for your life into and throughout retirement. That financial freedom is really the greatest celebration of all of our hard work and labor. So as we have one, or in the case of McIntire Retirement Services employees, 2 extra days off work. That's very nice of you, Chris. As you are celebrating your extra day off work, think about all of the extra days off of work into the future and how to make those as confident as possible. That is through having a plan, your game plan for retirement. Chris will put that together for you. Give a call, 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532. Chris, always a pleasure. Thank you for being here and celebrating the holiday weekend with us, celebrating all of our hard work.
Yay, my pleasure, everybody. Yep, take care, be safe, go Buckeyes.
Tune into Chris McIntyre's full radio program and visit McIntyreRetirementServices.com for many additional valuable resources, including other great episodes of Game Plan for Retirement with Chris McIntire. Be sure to subscribe.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.